What would you do if your billionaire boss accidentally walked in on your biggest secret, and instead of firing you, he fell for you? It started with a mistake, a door that opened too soon, a secret that wasn't meant to be seen. What followed wasn't love. It was an obsession dressed in silk. Welcome to today's story. Tell me in the comments, what time is it, and which country are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an adventure. The rain over Paris fell like silk that night, soft, steady, and relentless. Inside the towering gates of Maid'S, the world felt far removed from the chaos of the city beyond. The mansion stood like a sculpture of glass and gray stone, its chandeliers flickering against the storm, its silence rich with secrets. Celeste Moreau pressed her palms against her uniform skirt and inhaled deeply before stepping through the servants' entrance. The air smelled faintly of polish and peonies. Everything here gleamed, from the marble floors to the crystal banisters. She felt out of place, like a smudge on a diamond. "Rooms upstairs, attic level," said Madame Colette, the head housekeeper, a severe woman in her 50s whose mouth rarely smiled. "You rise before sunrise, breakfast service at 6. No wandering into the atelier without permission. Monsieur Drake values his privacy." Celeste nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Madame Colette." Her room was hardly more than a nook, a slanted ceiling, a single window overlooking the rooftops of Paris, and a narrow bed. But to Celeste, it was heaven. She unpacked her few belongings, a worn sketchbook, a small tin box of needles, a folded length of pale satin, and a faded photograph of her grandmother, Mireille, smiling, needle in hand. Celeste traced the edge of the photo, her chest tightening. "I made it here, grandmere. Somehow I made it." By day, she was invisible. She moved silently through the mansion, dusting vases that cost more than she would ever earn, polishing the mirrors in which she never dared to look too long. The staff talked in whispers about their employer, Lucien Drake, the genius of haute couture, the man who built an empire from thread and vision. They said he was untouchable, brilliant, cold, a man sculpted by heartbreak. Celeste never saw him at first. Only his presence, the echo of his footsteps, the trail of cologne that lingered in the hallway, the faint sound of a piano drifting through the closed doors of his private studio. But every night, when a mansion went to sleep, Celeste came alive. She would climb the creaky attic stairs, light her small oil lamp, and pull out her hidden treasures, scraps of silk, lace remnants from discarded gowns, and ribbons salvaged from the laundry. The lamp's glow painted gold across her fingers as she stitched, slow, precise, loving, like her grandmother once taught her. Each design she created told a story she couldn't speak out loud. Dreams of freedom, dresses that moved like whispers, dresses that could make a woman forget she'd ever been poor, scared, or small. One night, she unfolded her sketchbook, pages filled with delicate drawings, her grandmother's old-fashioned notes scrawled in the margins. Her eyes stung. She remembered that night 2 years ago, the night Mireille's heartbeat faded in a hospital bed, and Vincent Duret showed up at the door hours later. "Your grandmother owed me 50,000 euros, he'd said, twirling a silver ring on his pinky finger. "And debts don't die, Sherry. You pay, or I collect in other ways." Celeste had never forgotten his smirk, nor the way he'd brushed a finger along the sketches on her table, like he already owned her dreams. Since then, she'd lived quietly, hiding both herself and her talent. Until this job. Maid'S was supposed to be a safe place. But even here, the fear lived in her chest like a second heartbeat. It was nearly midnight the first time she saw Lucien Drake. She was arranging the morning tea set in the grand hall when the door opened, and he stepped in from a rain, tall, dark suit, no umbrella, droplets clinging to his hair. He didn't look like the man she'd seen on magazine covers. In person, he was sharper, his face leaner, eyes colder, like he carried storms behind him. "Good evening, monsieur," she murmured, lowering her gaze. He barely looked at her. "You must be the new maid," he said, removing his coat, his voice low, detached. "Do not enter the atelier without invitation. Ever." "Yes, monsieur," she replied quickly, her fingers tightening around the teapot handle. He walked away without another word. Yet something about her stillness lingered in his mind long after he disappeared up the staircase. There was something, not in her beauty, for she hid it well, but in her quiet poise, the way she seemed to shrink and yet radiate calm at the same time. Lucien tried to ignore it. He had no time for distractions. His ex-wife, Genevieve, had stripped him bare emotionally years ago. Since then, the only thing he trusted was fabric, the honesty of a stitch, the predictability of a pattern. People lied. Silk didn't. He retreated into his atelier that night, a cathedral of light and glass, filled with sketches pinned like constellations. For Lucien, creation was prayer. It was the only place his heart still beat freely. But upstairs, beneath the roof, another kind of creation was happening, a secret one. Celeste worked until her fingers ached, fitting a dress she designed on a mannequin made from old wire. The fabric shimmered faintly, pale lavender, like the Paris dawn. She smiled to herself, whispering, "For you, Grandmere. One day, the world will see." She didn't notice the time. The clock struck 2. The rain eased. From below, Lucien's piano stopped playing. For a brief moment, both of them, the billionaire and the maid, paused in the stillness of the same house, unaware that their worlds were about to collide. Celeste blew out her lamp and lay back on her bed, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling. Somewhere below, Lucien sat at his desk, staring at a blank sketch pad, feeling something shift deep in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. A strange curiosity. He couldn't explain it then. He wouldn't understand it until much later. But something about Maison Drake no longer felt as cold. And somewhere between silk and silence, an invisible girl had begun to change everything. The storm had returned, heavier this time, sheets of rain pounding against the glass roof of the atelier. The lightning flashed through the skylights, slicing the room in silver and shadow. The whole mansion slept, but Lucien Drake was still awake, as he always was on nights when memory refused to rest. The atelier was his sanctuary. Dozens of mannequins stood like ghosts in gowns, unfinished dreams awaiting his touch. Bolts of silk spilled across tables, sketches scattered like confessions. In this room, Lucien didn't have to be a CEO or a divorce or a man haunted by betrayal. Here, he was an artist. And tonight, art was his only companion. He loosened his tie and moved between the mannequins, tracing the shape of a half-finished gown. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within. He'd been staring at the same design for hours, but something about it felt wrong. Too perfect, too lifeless. "Where is the soul?" he muttered under his breath. "It's all form and no feeling." He dropped the pencil, rubbing his temples. Inspiration had abandoned him lately, and though he would never admit it aloud, he feared he'd lost whatever magic once made him Lucien Drake, the visionary, the creator, the man the world admired but he no longer recognized in the mirror. Upstairs, Celeste Moreau stirred in her narrow bed. The wind rattled the attic window, waking her from a shallow sleep. She sat up, heart beating fast. There was something about storms that always made her restless. They reminded her of the night her grandmother had passed, thunder rolling in the distance like an unfinished goodbye. She couldn't sleep. Not tonight. Her gaze drifted to the trunk under her bed, the one holding her secret creation, the dress she'd been working on in stolen moments for months. She hesitated, then slowly lifted the lid. The gown glimmered faintly in the dim light, soft ivory silk that shimmered like rainwater. It wasn't finished, but it was beautiful, the kind of dress that made her feel seen. She touched the fabric gently. "Just one last fitting," she whispered to herself. "No one will ever know." She dressed quietly, the satin sliding coolly against her skin. Then, holding her breath, she tiptoed down the hallway, the old floorboards sighing beneath her steps. The house was still. The only sound was the distant hum of thunder and the soft ticking of an antique clock. The atelier door was slightly ajar, a sliver of golden light spilling into the dark hall. Celeste hesitated. "He's never here this late," she thought. She peeked inside. The room looked empty. The stormlight flickered across the glass ceiling, painting everything silver. She slipped in. Her reflection appeared in one of the tall mirrors. The gown hugged her lightly, the train brushing the floor. For a moment, she forgot who she was. Not a maid, not a girl running from debts and danger, but an artist. Someone capable of beauty. Someone her grandmother would have been proud of. She turned slowly, watching how the fabric caught the light, her bare shoulders framed by the soft folds. She smiled, a rare, small, honest smile. Then the door clicked open behind her. Lucien froze. He hadn't meant to return. He'd gone to fetch a sketchbook from his study, still lost in thought. But when he stepped into the atelier, the sight before him knocked the breath from his chest. There, in the middle of the room, stood Celeste, the quiet maid he'd barely noticed, wearing a gown that looked as if it had been born from his own imagination. The fabric glowed against her skin, the stormlight catching every delicate line and curve. She looked like something out of a painting. Vulnerable, unaware, transcendent. For one long, suspended moment, the world fell silent. The lightning flashed across the skylight, freezing everything in silver light. Her reflection in the mirror, his stunned expression, the gown rippling in slow motion. Lucien's pulse stuttered. It wasn't desire that struck him first. It was recognition. He saw artistry, soul, emotion, everything he'd been searching for in his own work, standing right there before him, embodied in this quiet, unassuming woman. Celeste's breath caught as she saw him in the mirror. Her eyes widened, horror flooding her face. She spun around, clutching the fabric to her chest. "And Monsieur Drake, I was just," her voice trembled. "Please forgive me. I shouldn't be here." Lucien didn't move. He was still staring, trying to make sense of the moment. "That dress," he said softly, his tone unreadable. "Did you make it?" Celeste's throat tightened. "Yes, monsieur. I want to see if the hem." She stopped mid-sentence, panic rising. "I'll leave. I'll never come here again. Please don't fire me." Lucien finally blinked, as if waking from trance. "You made that?" he repeated, disbelief threading through his voice. But before he could take a step forward, Celeste backed away like a startled bird. "I'm sorry," she cried, and fled from the atelier, the door swinging shut behind her, leaving Lucien standing alone among the mannequins and lightning. Hours later, the mansion was silent again. Lucien sat at his drafting table, the storm now only a whisper beyond glass. Before him lay a blank sketchbook. His hand moved almost on its own, lines, shapes, curves, tracing the image that had burned itself into his mind. Celeste in the gown, caught between innocence and brilliance. He filled page after page, her silhouette, her expression, the way the fabric seemed alive. His pencil couldn't stop. He didn't understand it. He'd seen beauty all his life, sculpted, polished, deliberate, but this was raw, real, something he hadn't felt in years. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the sketches. "Who are you?" "Celeste Moreau," he murmured. Downstairs, in her attic room, Celeste sat on her bed, trembling. She pressed her hands to her face, humiliated. "He saw me. Oh God, he saw me." But beneath the shame, a flicker of something unexpected stirred in her chest. The strange awareness that, for the first time since she'd arrived at Maison Drake, someone had truly seen her. And somewhere between guilt and wonder, two lives quietly began to unravel. The morning after the storm felt unusually calm, like the world was catching its breath after a night of secrets. The atelier smelled of coffee and damp fabric, sunlight spilling through the tall Parisian windows. But inside Celeste's chest, a storm still raged. She hadn't slept. The memory of Lucien's eyes, that stunned, almost reverent look, kept replaying in her mind. She could still feel the weight of his silence, the way his gaze had traveled from her reflection to her trembling hands. She'd fled before he could say a word, heart pounding like a thief's. Now, as she sat outside his office, the ticking clock sounded like a countdown to her ruin. She was certain she'd be fired, or worse, exposed. "Celeste," came the low, smooth voice from inside. Her breath caught. She stood, smoothed her skirt, and stepped in. Lucien Delacroix was seated behind his massive mahogany desk, his shirt sleeves rolled up, sketches scattered around like evidence of an artist's obsession. He didn't look angry. He looked haunted. "Close the door," he said quietly. She obeyed, heart hammering. For a moment, he said nothing, just studied her. The silence stretched, charged. Finally, he leaned back, exhaled, and said something she didn't expect. "That gown last night, it was yours, wasn't it?" Celeste froze. I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Delacroix." He stood, cutting her off. "Don't lie to me. I recognized the hand. The stitching, the cut. It wasn't any of my apprentices. It was you." Her throat tightened. The secret she'd hidden for months, the late nights, sewing after everyone left, the sketches tucked behind bolts of fabric. It was all laid bare. "I only wanted to practice," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. Practice." His tone softened, incredulous. "Celeste, that gown was alive. It moved like it was breathing with you. I haven't seen fabric do that in years." She blinked, unsure whether she was being mocked or praised. He stepped closer, eyes burning with something she couldn't name. "You have a gift. One you've been hiding. I can't afford to draw attention," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "If people find out I'm designing under my name, he'll come for me." Lucien frowned. She hesitated, then dropped her gaze. "The man I owe money to. He doesn't take kindly to debts." Something shifted in Lucien's expression. Anger, maybe, or protectiveness. "And you've been paying him with your silence." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back, thinking. Then, he turned with the decisive air of a man used to making bold moves. "I have a proposal," he said. "You'll design. I'll mentor you, teach you properly. But for now, your work will go under my label. No one needs to know. We'll use a pseudonym, something only we share." Her head jerked up. "You do that for me?" He smiled faintly. "Let's say I do it for fashion. And maybe for redemption." Celeste searched his face. It wasn't pity she saw there. It was belief, genuine, dangerous belief. "But why risk your name?" she asked softly. "Because I haven't felt alive in years," he said, almost to himself. "And last night, watching you, I remembered why I fell in love with creation in the first place." There was a pause. Then, like the air finally exhaled, she nodded. "All right, I'll do it." A slow smile curved his lips. "Good. We start tonight." The first late-night session began with awkward silence and too much coffee. Celeste stood at the drafting table, her hair tied up messily, tracing lines with charcoal. Lucien watched her, occasionally offering quiet guidance, adjusting a hem, refining a silhouette. At first, it was professional. Then the lines blurred. By the second week, laughter had returned to the atelier. Arguments about fabric turned into teasing banter. He'd say, "You're too cautious," and she'd shoot back, "You're too arrogant." They worked until dawn, surrounded by scraps of silk and murmurs of old jazz from Lucien's record player. There were moments, stolen, fleeting, when their hands brushed, when his voice dropped low as he corrected her stitch, when her heart raced for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Lucien rediscovered something he thought he'd buried: passion. Not the kind that fades with time, but the kind that burns quietly, dangerously beneath the surface. And Celeste, for the first time in her life, felt seen. Not as a seamstress, not as a debtor or a girl surviving on scraps, but as an artist. She began to trust him, to open up, to believe that maybe, for once, her talent could be her way out. But Paris had a way of sniffing out secrets. Across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the Seine, Geneviève Delacroix, Lucien's ex-wife and former muse, sipped champagne as she flipped through a fashion magazine. Her assistant entered quietly. "Madam, there's been talk from the atelier. Late nights. New designs. Something different." Genevieve's perfectly arched brow lifted. "Different. They say Lucien's found a new spark." She smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "Has he now?" Setting her glass down, she stood, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Find out who she is," Geneviève said smoothly. "No one revives my husband's name without me knowing." Outside, the city glimmered, unaware that a storm was brewing again. Only this time, it wouldn't be rain and thunder. It would be jealousy, betrayal, and fire. And in the middle of it all, Lucien and Celeste were dancing closer to something they didn't yet understand. Something beautiful, forbidden, and bound to explode. Lucien Delacroix had always been a man of control, the kind who could sculpt chaos into beauty with a flick of a pen. But lately, his order was unraveling. The atelier, once his empire of elegance, now revolved around one quiet woman with calloused fingers and eyes full of storms, Celeste. Morning meetings with investors? Cancelled. Lunches with couture clients? Ignored. Deadlines? Forgotten. He had fallen into a rhythm that no one could interrupt. Days bled into nights. He barely noticed. What mattered now were her sketches, raw, alive, impossible to replicate. His staff began whispering. Assistants traded glances when he swept past, shirt sleeves rolled up, eyes sleepless but blazing. The once golden perfectionist was now a man possessed. Do you think she's sleeping with him? One intern murmured as Lucien brushed by without a word. Another shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe she's just his new obsession. They weren't entirely wrong. But what consumed Lucien wasn't lust. Not yet. It was something deeper, more dangerous. When he watched Celeste draw, he saw something he thought he'd lost forever. Truth. Her designs weren't polished or pretentious. They were emotion in fabric form, longing stitched into every seam. And every time she smiled, shy and fleeting, he felt something loosen inside him. The years of numbness, the polite society dinners, the empty applause, all of it faded. She made him feel alive. But for Celeste, that aliveness came with chains. She moved through the atelier like a ghost in daylight, graceful but cautious, always aware that shadows from her past were never far behind. Her hands would tremble whenever she saw the postman, or when footsteps echoed too loudly outside. Vincent Duret. The name alone sent chills crawling down her spine. He was the man who once promised to fund her dream, and instead trapped her in a nightmare of debt and deceit. He owned her sketches, her name, her silence. Or so he thought. She tried to bury the fear, to focus on the work. But sometimes, late at night, as she and Lucien pinned fabrics under the dim studio light, she would catch him looking at her, really looking, and she'd turn away, terrified that the truth would spill out. Celeste, he said one evening, his voice low as thunder. You disappear when I get too close. She kept her eyes on the mannequin. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. His tone softened. You're hiding something. She swallowed hard, the pins trembling in her hand. We all are, Monsieur Delacroix. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to read her soul, then smiled faintly. Then perhaps we're both ghosts. The next morning, the calm shattered. Genevieve Delacroix arrived unannounced, draped in silk and venom, her perfume trailing like poison through the atelier. The staff straightened instantly. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Genevieve, Lucien said coolly when she entered his office. To what do I owe this surprise? She smiled, sharp and elegant. Curiosity. I hear the great Lucien Delacroix has rediscovered his passion. He poured himself coffee, ignoring the jab. You've been listening to gossip again. Oh, come now, she purred. Paris lives for gossip, especially when it involves its most tragic lovers. He set the cup down with a soft clink. We were never tragic, Genevieve. Just done. Her eyes glittered. And yet, here you are, playing Pygmalion with your little seamstress. The staff says she's in your atelier every night. Alone. With you. Lucien's jaw tightened. You should go. She leaned forward, lips curling. Be careful, darling. People love a scandal. And this one has your name written all over it. Then she turned and swept out, leaving her perfume and her threat behind. Lucien exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to his temple. He knew Genevieve too well. She wouldn't just gossip. She'd dig. She'd hunt. That evening, as Celeste left the atelier, rain drizzled over the cobblestones. She pulled her coat tighter, head down. Paris glowed around her, the streetlights, the chatter, the soft hum of life, but she felt none of it. A figure stepped from the shadows. Bonsoir, Celeste. Her blood ran cold. Vincent Durrett, tall, immaculately dressed, eyes as sharp as broken glass. His smile was charming, but his presence was pure danger. She froze. Vincent. He stepped closer, umbrella tilted just enough to hide their faces. You've been busy, haven't you? I saw the sketches. The new designs. Her heart pounded. You shouldn't be here. Oh, but I should. You owe me, darling. His voice was soft, intimate. And now, you're designing again, under someone else's name. He tilted his head, mock sympathy dripping from every word. I could ruin you with one call. But I won't, not if you give me what I want. She whispered. What do you want? Your sketches, he said simply. Every single one. The new collection. You give them to me, and I disappear. If not, he smiled faintly. You know what happens when I'm disappointed. Her breath hitched. She remembered the bruises, the threats, the nights she'd run until her feet bled. I'll think about it, she said, voice trembling. He brushed a gloved finger down her cheek. Do that, but don't take too long. When he walked away, her knees nearly gave out. She clutched the wall, trying to breathe. Back in the atelier, Lucien stared at Celeste's sketches spread across his desk. They were brilliant, raw, and increasingly darker. He traced a line on the page, realizing the figures she'd drawn looked haunted. He didn't yet know why. But as the rain poured outside, and Celeste walked home under the weight of fear, Lucien's obsession and her secrets were tightening together like threads in the same tapestry. Beautiful, fragile, and doomed to tear. Neither knew it yet, but the moment their worlds collided again, something or someone would break. The whispers began like perfume in the wind, faint, intoxicating, and impossible to trace. In the dim-lit cafes of Paris, among the chatter of stylists and editors, a rumor was spreading. Lucien Delacroix's new collection wasn't his own. At first, it was only murmurs. A few fashion bloggers noted how different his latest sketches felt, softer, more daring, more feminine. Then came the questions. Then the headlines. By morning it exploded. Is Drake Atelier stealing from a mystery designer? Has the king of couture lost his touch? Lucien stood in his glass-walled office, staring at the magazine sprawled across his desk. His reflection in the window looked foreign, tired, tense, cornered. Behind him, the city pulsed with its usual indifference. He slammed the magazine shut and barked into the phone. Give me PR? Now. His assistant, pale and trembling, nodded and hurried out. Downstairs, the staff worked in uneasy silence. The air in the atelier felt heavier than silk, thick with fear and speculation. Meanwhile, in the sewing room, Celeste's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She had seen the articles too. Every line in them felt like a noose tightening around her neck. She whispered to herself, someone knows. Someone found out. Lucien appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. In my office, he said simply. She followed, her heart hammering. He shut the door behind them. You haven't spoken to anyone, have you? No, of course not. Then how the hell is my private collection, our collection, being dissected on social media? His voice cracked with anger. The designs, the color palettes, the cuts, they're all there. Someone leaked them. Celeste's throat tightened. Maybe one of the assistants saw something. He cut her off. No one touches my prototypes. No one except you. The accusation stung. Tears welled up, unbidden. You think I betray you? He rubbed his face, groaning. No, I don't know what to think. For the first time, she saw the cracks in him. Not the powerful CEO, but the man. Fractured, paranoid, desperate to protect what he'd built. She whispered, Lucien, someone wants to destroy you. He looked up. Their eyes met. A flash of realization crossed his face. Genevieve. Across town, Genevieve Delacroix was already 3 moves ahead. She lounged in a private bar, legs crossed, a glass of rose in hand. Opposite her sat Vincent Durrett, polished in a charcoal suit, his smile too slick to be sincere. So, Genevieve purred, you say this girl owes you? Vincent's grin widened. She does. And now she's hiding under your ex-husband's roof, pretending to be his little Cinderella. Genevieve leaned forward, amused. And you have proof? "Oh, I have everything," he said, pulling out a folded sketch. One of Celeste's designs, unmistakably identical to Lucien's leaked prototype. Her eyes gleamed. "Perfect." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Am I cut?" She swirled her drink. "Expose her. Make it public. You'll get the attention you crave and a very generous payment afterward." Vincent chuckled, tapping his glass against hers. "To beautiful ruin." Genevieve smiled. "To payback couture." That night, back at Maison Drake, the storm outside mirrored the chaos within. Lucien sat on the edge of his desk, hands buried in his hair, papers scattered like fallen feathers. Celeste stood nearby, pale and trembling. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "I only wanted to design." He looked at her then, really looked. The fear in her eyes wasn't guilt. It was something deeper, older. "Were you not telling me, Celeste?" he asked softly. Her composure cracked. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." She hesitated, then exhaled shakily. "There's a man, Vincent Durrett. He lent money to my grandmother when she got sick. After she died, he came for me. He said I owed him everything. The money, the house, even my sketches. He threatened me. Lucien." I had to run. Lucien's chest tightened. "You mean he's still looking for you?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "He found me again last week. He wants the collection. He said he'd destroy me if I didn't give it to him." Lucien stood, anger and protectiveness colliding inside him. "You should have told me. I was afraid." He took a step closer. "Afraid of me?" She met his eyes. "Afraid you'd send me away. That all this would vanish." The silence between them was electric, heavy with all the things they hadn't said. Lucien's voice dropped. "You've already changed everything." Her breath caught. "I don't care about the press. Or Genevieve. Or the investors." He moved closer. "All I care about is you." Celeste shook her head, her tears mixing with a bitter smile. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." He reached out. Not forcefully, not commanding, but with a gentleness that undid her. She hesitated only a moment before falling into him, her sobs breaking loose against his chest. He held her there, his hands in her hair, her heartbeat pounding against his ribs. When she finally looked up, their faces were inches apart. Breath against breath, fear against longing. The kiss that followed wasn't soft or cinematic. It was desperate, the kind born from exhaustion and heartbreak, from needing someone to see you when the world doesn't. It was the kind of kiss that blurred lines, burned bridges, and rewrote every rule they'd both lived by. After, the storm outside quieted, but the air inside felt charged, dangerous. Lucien brushed a strand of hair from her face. "This changes everything." Celeste nodded, tears drying on her cheeks. "I know." Neither spoke again, but they both understood what that night meant. It wasn't just passion. It was surrender, to love, to obsession, to ruin. And as the rain tapped softly against the glass, a new silence settled, fragile, temporary, because both of them knew something dark was coming. The betrayal wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Paris was alive that night. Flashing lights, velvet ropes, paparazzi shouting names like prayers. It was Fashion Week, and the city pulsed with glamour, ambition, and secrets. Inside the Grand Palais, the atmosphere was electric. Models glided in and out of fitting rooms. Stylists hissed orders in 3 languages, and the scent of hairspray mixed with the metallic tang of nerves. Every major designer in Europe had come to watch the debut of Étoile Noire, the mysterious new collection from Drake Atelier. What no one knew was that the real designer, the soul behind every stitch, was hiding backstage, heart pounding against her ribs. Celeste stood in the corner of the chaotic dressing area, clutching her sketchbook. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were alive, wide with fear, hope, disbelief. She'd done it. Her collection, on this stage, under a name that meant Black Star, the alias Lucien had chosen for her. "Breathe," whispered Amelie, one of the makeup artists who'd become her quiet ally. "You look like you're about to faint." Celeste gave a nervous laugh. "Maybe I am." Amelie smiled, then faint beautifully. Across the room, Lucien stood by the runway entrance, dressed in his signature black suit, phone in one hand, expression carved from marble. But Celeste saw the flicker beneath, the pride, the tension, the danger. This wasn't just another show for him. It was redemption, and a gamble. As the audience filed in, flashbulbs flared like lightning. Front row seats glittered with royalty, influencers, and rivals, including a pair of eyes that burned with vengeance. Genevieve Delacroix sat elegantly near the runway, her red lips curling into a smile as she spotted Lucien across the crowd. Beside her, Vincent Duret leaned back, a smirk tugging at his mouth. A manila folder rested casually on his lap. "Showtime," Genevieve whispered. Vincent tapped the folder. "Once this hits the press, your ex-husband's empire is finished. And so is your little Cinderella." Genevieve sipped her champagne. "Oh, Vincent, you underestimate how much I enjoy watching beautiful things burn." Backstage, Lucien's phone buzzed. A text. No name. Just a photo. Celeste's debt contract, signed by Vincent Duret. Then another message. "You can save her. Or yourself. You can't have both." Lucien froze. His chest tightened. He looked up, scanning the audience, and saw them, Genevieve and Vincent, side by side, smiling like snakes in silk. A cold understanding hit him. They weren't just coming for Celeste. They were coming for him. He turned, striding through the chaos until he found her standing behind a rack of shimmering dresses, adjusting a strap on one of the models. "Celeste," he said, grabbing her arm. She startled. "Lucien, what's wrong?" "They're here." His voice was low, urgent. "Genevieve and Vincent. They know everything. About you. About us." Her face went white. "What do we do?" He looked at her, really looked, and made his choice. "You let me handle it." The lights dimmed. The music began, a haunting orchestral piece that filled the glass dome of the Palais like a heartbeat. The models took their places, the first one stepping onto the runway in a black satin gown that shimmered like midnight oil. The audience gasped. Cameras flashed. Each piece that followed, every daring cut, every fluid silhouette, told Celeste's story. Grief, struggle, rebirth. By the fourth model, people were whispering in awe. By the seventh, they were silent. It was art. Real, breathtaking art. But in the front row, Vincent and Genevieve were already on the move. Vincent stood, waving a folder toward a cluster of reporters. "You want a headline?" he called, his voice slicing through the music. "Here's one. The man of the hour, Lucien Delacroix, has been stealing designs from his own maid." The room gasped. Cameras swung. A dozen flashes went off at once. Celeste froze backstage, the color draining from her face. Lucien stepped forward from the shadows near the runway. His voice cut clean through the chaos. "That's enough." The music stopped. Silence. Every eye in the room turned to him. He walked slowly toward the spotlight, hands steady, gaze unwavering. "You want the truth?" he said, looking straight at Vincent. "Fine. The designs are mine. Every line, every stitch, every concept. My team, my employees, helped bring them to life, including Miss Moreau, who I hired as an assistant. Nothing more." He paused, his tone sharpening. "And if anyone has the audacity to question the integrity of Drake Atelier, my lawyers will handle it." The audience murmured. Cameras whirred. Genevieve's smile faltered for the first time. Lucien turned to the models and nodded. "Continue the show." The music resumed. But backstage, Celeste stood frozen, a single tear trailing down her cheek. He denied her, denied everything they'd built together, everything they were. She turned and fled the room before anyone could stop her. When the final model took her bow and the audience erupted in applause, Lucien stood still, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. The collection was a triumph. Critics were already calling it revolutionary, but he felt hollow. He'd won the night and lost her. Hours later, Celeste sat alone on a bench by the Seine, still in her backstage uniform, mascara streaked across her cheeks. The newspaper headlines already screamed his name. Lucien Delacroix stuns Paris with Étoile Noire. But buried in the smaller print, one line caught her eye, a quote from Lucien himself during the post-show press conference. "Talent comes from unexpected places. Tonight's brilliance belongs to someone the world doesn't know, and may never know. But I do." And she saved me more than I'll ever save her. Celeste's breath hitched. He hadn't betrayed her. He'd protected her. She looked out over the dark river, the city lights flickering on the water. Her heart ached with love, guilt, and something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Because deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. This was only the spark before the inferno. The lights of the Grand Palais shimmered like stars caught in chandeliers, casting a celestial glow over the chaos that pulsed backstage. Assistants darted between racks of silk gowns and crystal-embroidered coats. Makeup artists shouted last-minute touch-ups, and somewhere amid it all, Lucien stood frozen, staring at the polished runway that would soon decide his fate. Paris Fashion Week, his resurrection, or his ruin. Celeste's collection, under the alias Etoile Noire, was about to be unveiled. Yet as he watched the organized storm swirl around him, Lucien's hands trembled. He had made his choice, to take the blame, to protect her. The world would think the collection was his. He would fire her publicly, crush her dream in front of cameras. All to save her from humiliation, from Genevieve's venom, from Vincent's blackmail. But even as he rehearsed his speech in his mind, something in his chest refused to stay still. "She won't forgive me," a voice whispered. And maybe she shouldn't. The curtains fluttered, and there she was. Celeste stormed into the backstage chaos like a gust of wind breaking through velvet. Gone was the timid girl from the atelier. This Celeste burned with fire. Her hair was swept back, her eyes fierce, and in her trembling hand she held the gown. The gown. The one she'd been stitching in secret that night he first saw her, when she was still just a maid mending dreams in silence. "Lucien," she said sharply, "you're not doing this." He turned, startled. "Celeste, not now." "Yes, now." Her voice cut through the hum of backstage chatter. "You're not taking the fall for me. I won't let you destroy yourself because of my past." He moved closer, lowering his tone. "If they expose you, you'll lose everything. Vincent and Genevieve are here. They're waiting for the right moment." Her jaw tightened. "Then let them wait." Lucien's chest tightened as he looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, the defiance that no longer hid behind politeness. For months, he had tried to protect her. But now, she didn't need saving. She needed a stand. "Celeste, please," he said, softer now, almost pleading. "You don't understand what they can do." "I understand perfectly," she whispered, stepping closer, her voice trembling but resolute. "I understand that hiding has cost me more than any debt ever could. I'm done being afraid." Before he could reply, the show director's voice boomed through the speakers. 5 minutes to curtain." Lucien turned, panic flashing in his eyes. "Celeste, it's too late. We can't." But she was already walking away. The gown shimmered in her hands, a cascade of pale gold silk and hand-sewn crystals. Her symbol, her story, her rebirth. And then, as if carried by fate itself, Celeste stepped onto the runway. The room fell silent. The first notes of the orchestral soundtrack swelled through the hall, a haunting piano melody that echoed through marble and light. The audience, expecting another of Lucien Marchand's immaculate illusions, gasped. There she was, not a model, not a muse, but a woman who had clawed her way from shadows to stand in the spotlight. Lucien froze behind the curtain. His heart pounded as he watched her glide across the runway. Every step deliberate, every breath defiant. The gown shimmered under the lights like liquid sunrise, the same design he'd first seen her sketch in secret. "She's wearing that?" gasped one assistant. "Who is she?" whispered a journalist in the front row. The murmurs grew louder, rippling through the audience like a rising tide. Genevieve, standing near the VIP seats, smirked, then froze as she realized the power of what she was seeing. This wasn't scandal. It was rebirth. And just as the applause began to swell, chaos struck. Vincent appeared from the shadows, shoving past a stylist, his face red with fury. In his hand, a folder of documents, debt statements, sketches, proof of everything he'd planned to expose. "You think you can hide from me, Celeste?" he hissed, loud enough for cameras to catch. "You owe me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Flashbulbs flared. The music faltered. Lucien emerged from backstage, striding toward him. Enough, he barked. You're finished, Vincent. Vincent laughed, holding up the papers. Finished? You'll both be done when the world sees this. But Lucien was ready. Calmly, he turned to the cameras. Everyone, meet Vincent Durrett, an extortionist who's been blackmailing one of my staff for months. These are his threats, his forged contracts. He held up a USB drive, tossing it to a security guard. And here's his confession. Recorded. The crowd erupted. Gasps, whispers, reporters surging forward. Security closed in on Vincent, who thrashed and shouted as they dragged him away. Genevieve, her plan unraveling before her eyes, stood frozen, her elegant mask cracking. And through it all, Celeste stood on the runway, breathless, trembling, radiant. Lucien turned to her. Their eyes met across the chaos. For a moment, everything else, the noise, the lights, the whispers, disappeared. Then, slowly, he stepped onto the runway. The audience went silent again as Lucien Marchand, the legend of Paris fashion, joined the young woman who had reignited his soul. He reached for her hand. She hesitated, then took it. Together, they walked to the end of the runway. The cameras flashed like lightning. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Tears glimmered in the eyes of jaded editors and hardened investors. For the first time, Lucien didn't see the applause as validation. He saw it as freedom. And as Celeste turned toward him, her lips trembling with disbelief and joy, he whispered just loud enough for her to hear, "You saved me, too." The lights dimmed. The music swelled again. Paris Fashion Week had witnessed scandals before, but never a moment so raw, so electric, so human. By the time the curtain fell, Etoile Noir was no longer a mystery name whispered in secret. It was legend, and the woman behind it, once a maid, now a muse, had rewritten her destiny in silk and fire. The world woke up talking about one name, Celeste Durand, the maid who became the muse who became the miracle. Every newspaper headline screamed her story. The hidden hand behind Paris' most daring collection. From servant to star, the woman who stole Fashion Week. Lucien Marchand's mystery muse revealed, and she's redefining couture. Overnight, Celeste's anonymity dissolved into legend. Fashion houses from Milan to New York sent offers, begging her to join their ranks. Journalists camped outside her tiny Montmartre flat. Influencers called her the soul of the new Paris. But while the city buzzed with champagne and gossip, Lucien Marchand sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the morning light creeping over the Seine. The world might have seen victory, but to him, the show had ended in silence. He'd lost control of the narrative, of the empire he'd spent decades building. Investors demanded meetings, deals, explanations. Some were furious, others thrilled. They all wanted the same thing, Lucien and Celeste together again. But Lucien had made his decision. For the first time in his life, he didn't care about legacy, profit, or reputation. He cared only about her. The atelier smelled faintly of jasmine, soap, and fabric starch, exactly as it had the night Celeste first dared to touch one of his gowns. The morning light spilled through tall windows, catching dust motes that drifted like tiny ghosts of dreams past. She stood at the work table, hair loosely tied, wearing a linen dress smudged with charcoal and thread. The noise of Paris seemed far away. Around her lay scattered sketches, pieces of lace, half-finished designs. Her world, raw and unguarded. Lucien stepped inside quietly. He didn't announce himself. He just watched. Celeste sensed him before she turned. She didn't flinch this time. "I thought you'd be surrounded by reporters," she said softly, keeping her eyes on the sketch before her. "They're all outside," he said. "I told my assistant to tell them I'm dead." She laughed, that low, genuine sound he'd missed. "That's dramatic, even for you." He smiled faintly, stepping closer. "I suppose it's fitting. I was dead before you walked into my life." Celeste looked up then, and their eyes met. No tension, no fear, just understanding. "You don't have to say that," she murmured. "I'm not saying it for you," Lucien said. "I'm saying it because it's true." He exhaled, his voice steady but soft. "I spent years chasing perfection. The next show, the next masterpiece, the next applause. But nothing ever felt alive. Then you walked in, and suddenly everything, every stitch, every thread, meant something again. Celeste lowered her gaze, her fingers brushing against a swatch of fabric. And yet, you were willing to destroy yourself to save me. Lucien's expression softened. I wasn't saving you, Celeste. I was trying to make up for what I'd lost, for every person I'd trampled in the name of beauty. You reminded me that art isn't about control. It's about truth. She looked at him then, really looked. The man who once seemed untouchable now stood before her, stripped of his armor. The proud designer had become human. Do you know what I realized that night? She asked quietly. What? That every time you saw me as a muse, I saw you as a mirror. He frowned slightly. You reflected back the part of me I tried to hide, the dreamer who still believed she was worth something. You made me fight for it again. Silence filled the space between them, soft, electric. Lucien took a step closer. His voice was barely a whisper. You were never just my muse, Celeste. You were the piece I didn't know was missing. Her lips curved, slow and tender. Then let's stitch it together. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. The moment felt both fragile and infinite. Two artists finally mending what the world had tried to tear apart. Outside, the first rays of dawn brushed across the rooftops of Paris, turning the atelier's windows gold. Weeks later, Maison Drake reopened, but this time, the sign over the door had changed. Maison Marchand. Inside, the walls hummed with new energy. Reporters whispered that the upcoming collection would redefine couture again, but this time, it wasn't about drama or scandal. It was about rebirth. The staff worked in near-reverent silence, watching the pair who had become the talk of Paris. Lucien, no longer the tyrant of perfection, now listened, genuinely listened, as Celeste moved through the room with quiet authority, guiding her team, laughing, creating. Every fabric, every line carried their shared signature, her honesty, his discipline. Two worlds stitched into one vision. And yet, amid all the frenzy, there were moments only they shared. Early mornings over espresso and sketchbooks. Late nights where they argued over thread colors and ended up kissing under lamplight. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, real, alive. One afternoon, as Paris shimmered under a pale spring sun, Lucien found her standing by the window, gazing out at the city. He approached, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. You realize, he murmured against her ear, they're all calling you the future of fashion. She smiled, leaning back against him. Then they're wrong. Wrong. I'm not the future, she said softly. We are. Lucien chuckled, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. Then let's make something worthy of it. Months later, the world gathered again. The runway lit like a dream reborn. This time, there was no alias, no secret. The collection was presented under one name, printed boldly in gold across the invitation. Celeste Durand. As the final gown floated down the runway, a masterpiece of silk and light that mirrored the one she had once worn herself. The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Lucien stood backstage, watching her smile through tears as cameras flashed. He didn't step forward this time. The stage was hers. But when she turned and caught his gaze through the glare of the lights, he mouthed just two words, "Thank you." And in that moment, Paris itself seemed to exhale. A story of redemption, stitched together by love, courage, and art. As dawn broke over Maison Marchand, the world outside kept buzzing, but inside the atelier, two hearts worked in quiet harmony, sketching, laughing, dreaming. This time, her name was on the label. And this time, it was forever.